to the World Seniors YouTube channel. Some great news, guys. We have Jason Francis and Phil Taylor here. Spoiler alert, Phil, you're committing your long-term future to the World Seniors.
Yep, 2 more years at least. I'm really looking forward to it, I'll be honest with you.
It was supposed to be the fairy tale comeback of darts legends, but in just 3 short years, the World Seniors Darts Tour went from sold-out arenas and nostalgic glory to silence, refunds, and a shocking collapse nobody saw coming. How did a tour that once promised to keep legends alive on the stage disappear almost overnight? When the World Seniors Darts Championship was first announced in 2022, it sounded almost too good to be true. A brand new circuit designed exclusively for darts legends over 50, bringing them back to the very stage where so many unforgettable moments had been made. For fans who grew up watching these icons, it wasn't just another tournament, it was a time machine. The venue chosen for the grand launch couldn't have been more symbolic: the Circus Tavern in Purfleet, Essex. This wasn't just any hall, it was the birthplace of modern darts' biggest stage. From 1994 to 2007, it hosted the PDC World Championships, and during that time, it became synonymous with drama, passion, and unforgettable battles. Ask any darts fan, and they'll tell you, the Circus Tavern had a heartbeat of its own. Bringing the Seniors Tour there was like reopening a vault of golden memories, and the lineup, nothing short of legendary. The 16-time world champion Phil "The Power" Taylor stepping onto the Osh again. 3-time world champion John Lowe, who helped shape the game decades earlier. John Part, Kevin Painter, and a roster filled with names who had not only competed at the highest level, but had helped define darts for an entire generation. For older fans, it was a chance to see their heroes again. For younger viewers, it was an opportunity to witness living history. The hype wasn't just fan-driven, broadcasters wanted in too. BT Sport agreed to air the event, and ticket sales were strong from the moment they opened. You could feel the buzz. Social media lit up with anticipation, and the nostalgia factor was irresistible. For once, darts wasn't just about the up-and-coming prodigies of the PDC, it was about legends reclaiming the spotlight. When the tournament finally kicked off, the atmosphere was electric. The tavern's intimate setting of just over 1,000 seats meant every cheer, every gasp, every roar from the crowd echoed like thunder. Fans weren't just watching a competition, they were watching living history unfold. Many in the audience had been there decades earlier, when Taylor or Lowe or Part were in their prime. Now they were back, older but still fierce, proving they could still throw with precision under pressure. Robert Thornton, nicknamed The Thorn, seized his chance to shine. Against a stacked field of legends, he played with ruthless consistency, dropping just 3 sets in the entire tournament to claim the inaugural seniors crown. For Thornton, it was redemption. For fans, it was proof that the seniors wasn't just an exhibition, it was real competition with serious intensity, and yet, for all the nostalgia, there was something deeper happening. The success of that first championship proved there was a genuine appetite for darts beyond the main circuit. It wasn't just about honoring the past, it was about carving out a new lane in the sport. Suddenly, what started as a one-off experiment looked like the beginning of something much bigger. By the time the lights dimmed on that first championship, there was no question. The World Seniors Darts Tour had landed with a bang. Fans left the tavern talking not about retirement, but revival. Legends who had faded from the spotlight were suddenly headline acts again. Broadcasters and sponsors saw potential, and players, many of whom thought their careers were behind them, were hungry for more. But as it turned out, this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the opening chapter of a meteoric rise that would captivate fans, expand into multiple tournaments, and eventually come crashing down in ways nobody expected. The success of the very first World Seniors Darts Championship sent ripples across the darts community. What had started as an experimental nostalgia event at the Circus Tavern quickly proved it was more than just a one-off trip down memory lane. Fans were hungry for more, and the organizers knew they had tapped into something powerful. The demand was immediate. Not long after Robert Thornton lifted that inaugural trophy, whispers began circulating that more tournaments were on the way. And sure enough, the calendar began to expand. Later in 2022, the World Seniors Masters was announced, this time hosted at another legendary venue, Lakeside Country Club. For decades, Lakeside had been the home of the BDO World Darts Championship, and to many fans, it was sacred ground. By choosing these iconic locations, the Seniors Tour wasn't just building competitions, it was deliberately weaving itself into the fabric of darts history. The Masters lived up to the hype. Phil Taylor, still carrying the aura of the power, reached the final, reminding everyone why he had been the most dominant force in darts for over 2 decades. But the fairy tale ending wasn't his this time. Canadian qualifier David Cameron shocked the crowd by beating Taylor to claim the title, proving that the seniors wasn't just about big names showing up, it was about real competition with room for underdogs to make their mark. Momentum built quickly, the World Seniors match play followed, and once again Taylor fought his way deep into the tournament. Yet again, he fell short, this time to Thornton, who cemented himself as the early king of the senior circuit. The tournaments had quickly established personalities and storylines. Thornton was the man to beat, Taylor the iconic legend chasing fresh glory, and players like John Part, Kevin Painter, and Martin Adams were reintroducing themselves to fans who hadn't seen them on TV in years. But it wasn't just the players who made the tour special, it was the atmosphere. Fans described it as darts with soul. These weren't 10,000-seat arenas filled with flashing lights and blasting music. These were intimate, almost nostalgic gatherings where the connection between player and crowd was palpable. Every dart thrown carried decades of history behind it. Every match was laced with a feeling that you were witnessing a rare reunion of greatness. By late 2022, the Seniors Tour had grown into a genuine force. A 4th tournament, the Champion of Champions, was announced. This wasn't just an add-on event, it was designed as a showcase for the very best of the best. Hosted in Blackpool, another city rich in darts tradition, the tournament attracted worldwide interest, and in its very first edition, American Leonard Gates stunned the field by storming to victory. Suddenly, the Seniors Tour wasn't just reviving European legends, it was giving a platform for international players to shine. The formula seemed unbeatable. Nostalgic venues, legendary names, genuine competition, and a fast-growing fan base. Streaming numbers were strong, ticket sales were steady, and word of mouth was spreading. Commentators noted how clever the organizers had been in picking venues that already had built-in history. It gave every event a sense of importance, even in its very first year. By the end of 2023, the Seniors Tour had established itself as a permanent fixture. 4 televised tournaments a year, packed crowds, storylines that drew fans in, and an expanding roster of players who proved this wasn't just a parade of the past. It was darts history being written in real time. For many fans, it felt like the tour had limitless potential. But underneath the celebrations, subtle cracks were beginning to form. Nobody paid much attention to them at the time. After all, success seemed undeniable. But in hindsight, these small warning signs would foreshadow the trouble to come. By the time 2024 rolled around, the World Seniors Darts Tour looked unstoppable. With multiple major tournaments under its belt, strong backing from broadcasters, and a loyal fan base, it seemed the organizers were ready to take the next step. And they did, through an ambitious rebranding. In November of that year, the tour officially changed its name from the World Seniors Darts Tour, WSDT, to simply the World Seniors Darts, WSD. It was more than just a cosmetic change, it signaled a shift in direction. Alongside the rebrand came a controversial new rule. The age requirement, once proudly set at 50 and above, was lowered to 45. The idea, according to organizers, was to broaden the pool of eligible players, attract slightly younger stars, and keep the competition fierce. For some, this was exciting. It meant players who had recently left the professional circuit could now step onto the senior stage, bringing fresh rivalries and renewed quality. But for others, both fans and players, the decision sparked debate. The charm of the tour had always been its nostalgic focus, celebrating legends who had been absent from the spotlight for years. By lowering the age limit, critics argued, the line between the PDC circuit and the senior stage became blurred. That wasn't the only change. The organizers also shifted toward more invitation-based entries for televised events. Instead of open qualifying paths, more spots were handed directly to recognizable names. On one hand, this guaranteed TV audiences star power. On the other, it risked alienating lesser-known players who had earned their shot through qualifiers. Some voices in the darts community worried this move would narrow opportunities and create an exclusive club rather than a truly open tour. Still, on the surface, the rebrand seemed successful. The tournaments continued to draw decent numbers, and fans still turned up in strong spirits. The 2024 season saw more memorable moments. Thornton capturing his second world title, Gates and John Henderson carving their names into the history books, and new faces testing their mettle against legends. For most casual viewers, the ride was still thrilling, but beneath the excitement, financial pressures were mounting, prize funds began to shrink, and whispers circulated about the rising costs of production. Organizing televised tournaments at iconic venues wasn't cheap, sponsorship money wasn't rolling in as heavily as before, and ticket sales, while still respectable, weren't always selling out. The tour was starting to walk a fine line between prestige and sustainability. Some players quietly raised concerns, noting that while the events were prestigious, the earnings weren't enough to cover the travel, preparation, and commitments required. For legends like Taylor, who had long retired from full-time competition, the money wasn't the driving factor, it was legacy. But for many others, the reduced prize funds made the future of competing less secure. The warning signs were faint, but they were there. Rebranding can be a powerful move, but it can also destabilize what made something special in the first place. By late 2024, fans had begun to notice that the marketing wasn't as loud, the hype wasn't quite as electric, and the once celebratory energy around the tour was softening. Still, nobody imagined how quickly things would spiral the following year, because if 2022 and 2023 were the years of glory, and 2024 was the year of change, then 2025 would be the year of collapse. At the start of 2025, you would have struggled to find anyone predicting trouble for the World Seniors Darts. The year opened with strong fanfare, Ross Montgomery claiming 2 big wins and a brand new competition, the World Seniors Open, slotted into the calendar. To the casual fan, everything looked smooth. Tickets were on sale, events were being promoted, and the circuit appeared to be building momentum, not losing it. But under the surface, things weren't quite as perfect as they seemed. Players and insiders began noticing subtle but worrying changes. Prize money was reduced in some events, making it harder for players outside the top names to justify the costs of competing. For legends with established reputations, this wasn't a career decision, it was passion. But for others, the shrinking prize funds cut deep. Sponsorship too wasn't what it had once been. While the tour had been able to attract partners early on, enthusiasm seemed to be cooling. Some potential backers were hesitant, pointing to the aging player base and questioning whether the format had the legs for long-term growth. A tour built on nostalgia can be powerful, but nostalgia alone doesn't always pay the bills. Meanwhile, fans began spotting red flags. Marketing efforts suddenly quieted. Where once there had been a flurry of social media buzz, promotional videos, and interviews hyping up each event, the channels started to fall strangely silent. Posters for upcoming tournaments disappeared from circulation. Even official announcements became less frequent and less detailed. For an organization that had thrived on building excitement, the silence was deafening. Behind the scenes, rumors swirled of organizational strain. Running multiple televised tournaments each year was expensive, especially in iconic venues like Lakeside and Circus Tavern. Broadcasting costs, production crews, logistics, all of it added up. Some insiders later admitted the tour had been operating on thin margins almost from the beginning. In other words, the glamour on stage masked the financial balancing act happening off it.
And we had to look at ourselves and say, one, financially they weren't working. You know, we were paying out over £7,000 a weekend.
By the spring of 2025, uncertainty was starting to spill out into the public. Fans noticed that tickets for certain events, once eagerly promoted, were quietly pulled from sale. Websites that had previously listed schedules were suddenly edited, removing references to future tournaments. Forums lit up with speculation. Was it a temporary setback, a rescheduling, or was something more serious going on behind closed doors? Players too were left in the dark. Many of them were training and preparing as if the season would carry on as planned. For some, especially those relying on seniors darts for income and exposure, the uncertainty was unsettling. And yet, official word remained absent. No press releases, no statements, just silence. This silence bred suspicion. Fans began asking harder questions. Was the rebrand in late 2024 a mistake? Did lowering the age limit dilute what made the tour unique? Were sponsors backing away because the vision no longer seemed clear? Nobody knew for sure, but what everyone could feel was a shift. The confidence and momentum that had defined the first 3 years were fading, and then came the most chilling sign yet. As spring turned to summer, entire events began disappearing from the calendar. Not postponed, not rescheduled, but cancelled without explanation. Tickets already purchased were refunded, sometimes without any official statement to accompany the refund. Websites were taken down. Social media accounts were quietly renamed, stripped of the seniors branding that had once been a badge of pride. It was as though the tour was being erased in real time. For the loyal fan base that had followed every dart since 2022, it felt surreal. How could something that seemed so alive just months earlier now be vanishing in silence? It wasn't just an organizational hiccup, it was a vanishing act. And if anyone hoped that these were just temporary growing pains, what came next confirmed their worst fears. By mid-2025, the writing was on the wall, but few could believe it. The World Seniors Darts, once a thriving showcase of legends, was unraveling before everyone's eyes. One by one, events disappeared. The much-anticipated Seniors Open never happened. The tour calendar, once full of promise, had turned into an empty shell. Fans refreshing the official website were greeted with error messages, or, later, nothing at all. The site was completely taken down. For weeks, there was no explanation. Refunds trickled back to ticket holders, but no public statement came from the organizers. Social media accounts, once buzzing with highlights and nostalgia clips, were stripped of their branding and renamed. To many, it felt like watching history being deleted. The silence was broken not by an official press release, but by a legend himself. John Lowe, one of the most respected figures in darts, took to Facebook with a sobering announcement: the World Seniors Darts had folded. He admitted it was a blow for many, but praised the effort of those who had tried to make it work. Coming from Lowe, the words carried weight. For fans still clinging to hope, it was confirmation that the dream was over. The reaction was immediate. Shock, disappointment, and frustration flooded fan forums and comment sections. Some blamed the financial realities of running such a tour. Others criticized the decisions to rebrand, lower the age limit, and move toward invitation-only formats. Many simply mourned the loss of what had been a beloved reminder of darts' golden age. Players too were left in limbo. For legends like Taylor, Lowe, and Thornton, retirement was already part of their lives. But for others, the senior circuit had been more than nostalgia. It had been a stage to compete, to earn, and to stay connected with the sport they loved. The sudden collapse meant lost income, lost opportunities, and in some cases, a lost sense of purpose. Even younger fans who had discovered darts history through the Seniors Tour felt the void. It had been a bridge between generations, a rare chance to see iconic names share the stage again. Without it, that bridge was gone. Speculation about why it ended spread quickly. Some insiders pointed to rising production costs that outweighed ticket and broadcast revenues. Others suggested sponsorship money had dried up, leaving the organizers without the funds to continue. Still others argued that the rebrand in 2024 confused the identity of the tour, weakening its unique appeal. The truth may have been a mix of all these factors, but with no official explanation, nobody could be certain. What was certain was the impact. The sudden disappearance of the seniors left a hole in the darts calendar. Fans who had already booked travel for events were left disappointed. Broadcasters lost a product that had been drawing steady numbers, and the players, once again, were left to fade into the background. It was a bitter end, made even harsher by the way it unfolded, quietly, without warning, without closure. For something that had begun with such energy and joy, its demise felt abrupt, even cruel. And yet, as fans reflected on what had been lost, a question lingered. Was this truly the end, or was there still a chance that senior darts in some form could rise again? When the news finally sank in that the World Seniors Darts had folded, the emotional ripple it sent through the darts community was unlike anything seen in years. Fans, players, and even casual viewers who had stumbled across the tour on TV or streaming found themselves mourning not just the end of a competition, but the end of a movement. For fans, the seniors had been more than darts. It was nostalgia brought to life. It was the chance to walk into the Circus Tavern or Lakeside again, to sit shoulder to shoulder in intimate venues where you could feel the heat of the stage lights and hear every cheer bounce off the walls. Many described it as reconnecting with their childhood or teenage years, those nights when they stayed up late to watch Phil Taylor dominate, or when John Part shocked the world. To have that taken away so suddenly felt like losing a part of the sport's soul. Online forums filled with stories. One fan wrote about taking his father to the Seniors Championship in 2022, the same father who had taken him to the PDC World Championship decades earlier. Another shared how his young son had become a fan of darts only after watching the seniors, because he was fascinated by the idea of old champions still competing. The seniors had bridged generations in a way no other darts circuit could, and now that bridge was gone. the players' reactions were just as raw. Robert Thornton, who had become the face of the seniors with multiple titles, admitted in interviews that the closure was heartbreaking. For him, it wasn't about the money, it was about proving that his career still had meaning, that his story wasn't finished. Leonard Gates, who had found international recognition through the seniors, suddenly lost the very stage that had given him new life. And Ross Montgomery, fresh off his 2025 victories, was left wondering what might have been had the circuit lasted just one more year. Even the legends who didn't rely on the income felt the sting. John Lowe, who had confirmed the end on Facebook, described it as a blow for many. Phil Taylor, long since retired from the professional grind, spoke about how much he had enjoyed competing again, not for trophies, but for the sheer love of the sport. For these icons, the seniors was more than nostalgia, it was a celebration of their craft, a final encore before the lights went out. The emotional fallout extended to the broader darts world too. Some fans began questioning whether the PDC, the dominant professional circuit, had played an indirect role by monopolizing sponsors and broadcasters. Others debated whether the seniors had expanded too fast, overestimating its financial foundations, and still others wondered if lowering the age limit in 2024 had undermined what made the tour special in the first place. The arguments raged, but they all stemmed from the same place: grief that something beloved had been lost. Perhaps the hardest part was the silence. Unlike other sporting collapses where detailed explanations are given, the World Seniors Darts vanished almost without a trace. No grand farewell, no public thank you, no official statement to bring closure. Just a quiet erasure of websites, social media, and schedules. That lack of transparency left many fans feeling betrayed. They had invested not just money in tickets and streams, but emotion in the stories, rivalries, and legends the seniors had reignited, and they were left with nothing but unanswered questions. Yet even in the midst of that sadness, there was resilience. Some fans started petitions online urging organizers to reconsider or for another company to step in and revive the concept. Others shared highlight reels, flooding social media with clips of Thornton's dominance, Gates' celebrations, and Taylor's return to the stage. In a way, the community was trying to preserve the memory of the seniors before it faded completely. The emotional fallout wasn't just about darts, it was about the universal truth of sport. Legends fade, eras end, but when something gives us a glimpse of the past and then disappears too soon, it leaves a wound that doesn't heal easily. The Seniors Tour was proof that people don't just watch for trophies, they watch for stories, for connections, for the joy of seeing heroes they thought were gone stand tall once more. And that's why its loss cuts so deeply. So, what do we make of the fleeting rise and sudden fall of the World Seniors Darts? In just 3 years, it went from a dream come true, packed venues, nostalgic heroes, unforgettable moments, to a quiet disappearance that left everyone asking why. It rose faster than anyone expected, but it also collapsed faster than anyone could have imagined. The truth is, the seniors didn't fail because fans stopped caring. If anything, fan passion was stronger than ever. The crowds turned up, the streams pulled numbers, the appetite was there. What killed it was something else. A storm of high costs, dwindling sponsorship, internal decisions that blurred its identity, and perhaps an overestimation of how long nostalgia alone could carry a business. But here's the thing, sport has a funny way of coming back. Darts especially has always been about resilience. Players reinvent themselves, organizations adapt, and what looks like the end can often be a pause before something new emerges. Even as the seniors brand folded, whispers began that perhaps the concept wasn't dead, just dormant, waiting for someone bold enough to pick up the torch. For now, all fans can do is remember. Remember the roar of the Circus Tavern in 2022. Remember the shock of David Cameron beating Taylor at Lakeside. Remember Thornton's dominance, Gates' rise, Montgomery's late surge. These moments may not return, but they happened, and they proved that legends never truly fade. Maybe one day, another senior circuit will rise, learning from the mistakes of the past while carrying forward the spirit that made the original so special. Maybe the torch hasn't been extinguished, just passed on, waiting for the right hands to lift it again. Until then, the story of the World Seniors Darts will be remembered not as a failure, but as a fleeting miracle. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful stories in sport aren't about how long something lasts, but about how brightly it burns, even if only for a short time. Because in the end, the seniors didn't just bring back darts legends. For a few unforgettable years, it brought back time itself. And that, for fans, was worth everything.